They gotta play us. It's a motto used by the Bengals this year, as they now stand a game away from repeating as AFC champs and a chance to show their power once again in the AFC. Same motto and confidence is being used by other teams in Ohio, specifically Xavier and Ohio State's men's basketball teams, as they face tough tests on the roads this weekend, but come into the game as underdogs, once again looking to make a statement. I'm Mahir Hassan, and welcome back to another episode of Buckeye Sports Breakdown. As I said earlier, I'll break down Xavier and Ohio State, and then Wayne Box Miller, host for Bengals Radio Network, will join me to talk Bengals and preview the AFC Championship this weekend. But first, let's take a look at this week's quick hits. Of course, you may have heard this on Wednesday, as Scott Rowland, former Cincinnati Red, is heading to Cooperstown. Of course, I actually had a trading card of Scott Rowland back when I was a young kid. I believe I was about 8 or 9 years old, and it's just great to see him get to that spot. Obviously, I saw him on the back end of his career, 2011, 2012. Didn't play that much with the Reds, but overall had a veteran appearance on that squad and really showed his power there. And he was a fan favorite. I remember one of the first, it wasn't a jersey, but it was one of those like shirts that looked like a jersey, kind of like the Joe Burrow shirt, but picture this as a shirt. You get what I'm saying. But nonetheless, it was one of those shirts where it was Joey Votto and Scott Rowland. And those are the two guys I kind of associated with the most with the Reds. Of course, Votto's still there, could be heading to the Hall of Fame himself, but Rowland definitely showed it there looking at his career. More than 2,000 games played, about more than 1,200 runs. RBIs are about 1,287. Ended up winning the World Series with the Cardinals back in 2006 and spent 4 seasons with the Reds in the back end of his career. So as I said before, well-deserved for that man right there. Let's take a look at some other quick hits, as the U.S. men's national team is out in L.A. this week to play in some friendlies. They faced off against Serbia on Wednesday, and then they will take on Colombia on Saturday. 3 players from the state of Ohio are featuring in the squad this time around: Brandon Vasquez and Roman Salentano for FC Cincinnati, and Aiden Morris for Columbus. Vasquez and Morris both started that game, and Vasquez scored the only goal of the match for the United States. Unfortunately, they fell 2-1 against Serbia. But nonetheless, Vasquez showed his appearance, and I forget the number, but I think that was the 58th time a player scored in his U.S. men's national team debut. So once again, congrats to Brandon. Could have been on the plane to Qatar, but nonetheless, showing he really matters in this U.S. men's national team squad. Could see Salentano in the game on Saturday. Wouldn't be surprised, as there were some other young options there. Gaga Slonina ended up starting that game against Serbia on Wednesday. However, he did allow 2 goals. Could have allowed a third if it wasn't for a great save by him. And finally, in the quick hits, Dayton, not flying high right now. They were a contender to get into March Madness earlier this year, but now they picked up 2 straight losses, and they need to right the ship, and right the ship quick as well. They'll face Richmond this Saturday at 4:00. 5-3 in the conference right now, which may not seem that bad, at least when you look at other teams in the state of Ohio. But when push comes to shove, there's only going to be about 1 team from the Atlantic 10, maybe 2 if there's a good at-large bid that is going to be heading to the big dance. So that being said, Dayton's going to have to use their act up. Otherwise, the only way they're making it is if they win the Atlantic 10 later this year. So let's take a look at the teams, and we'll start off with the Xavier Musketeers, coming off a road win against the Yukon Huskies, able to pull out the brooms and call it a sweep in Storrs, Connecticut this past Wednesday. So overall in this game, I said this last week and I'll say it again. This was a game Xavier needed to show they can make a run in March Madness. As much as Cintas Center helps with the wins and helps with the seeding, anything goes in the big dance. Meaning, Xavier's going to have to rely on some of those areas where sometimes they're the neutral team, sometimes they're the road team. Some of those bumps come in the road here and there. And Obviously, that's what's happened in years past. Look at, one of Chris Mack's final years with Xavier. They were number one seed. They're flying high, got the Big East regular season trophy. They were out in the first weekend. So overall, we've seen that before with Xavier, where despite having a good regular season, they kind of falter off. Overall, I will say this with the UConn side that one is in the top 25 and two was favored by 6 points going into this one. Xavier put up a good performance. Obviously, the Huskies struggled early on in that one, but I got to say, I mean, Tim Brando, the play by play guy for that game, said it best. There are about 30 teams right now that could make the Final Four. And rightfully so, I think Xavier, if they can clean up their act a little bit on defense, oh boy, they're a contender. And Sean Miller knows a thing or two about managing top teams and potentially getting a Final Four run unto itself. Of course, going back to his days when he coached U of A, of course, that university down south where I am here at Arizona State. But nonetheless, it was a gritty win down the stretch. And as I said earlier, maybe a change of the tide, maybe something Sean Miller wants to execute. Speaking of executing, Soleil Boom did a great job down the stretch, and he was a clutch marksman, 5 for 7 from behind the arc. Again, wasn't that noticeable? Wasn't the guy controlling the ball, but when he got it, oh boy, he went off in the sense that just when you think UConn is getting back in the game, they can get the lead, and then suddenly the lead could slip away from Xavier, or in sense, UConn builds it, and then they have a swing of their own. Xavier was like, nope, we still got the lead and we still got the power. Gamble Pavilion, I'll tell you this, they were raucous. They were raucous on Wednesday. But you know what? Xavier kept their cool under pressure, almost like Joe Burrow. Kept their cool under pressure. They showed it there. So Soleil Boom once again landing the boom for the Muskies. Looking at other players on that squad, how about Colby Jones? Once again, almost the maestro of this team, 20 points. He also had some good looks from behind the arc. And again, coming up clutch. And that's what Xavier has been doing throughout the season, obviously from the offensive standpoint. Boy, did they show it there. Despite having a 15-point lead at halftime and blowing it, they're able to keep that advantage overall. And I think that's something that, when you have that momentum, that too, you're on the road and you lose that momentum. It's just an entirely different story. And yet you're still able to keep that composure. Oh boy. Oh boy. That's good. That's really good when Xavier can get to those games in March, conference championships, March Madness, that first weekend. If they make it to Sweet 16 and Elite Eight, that included. Overall, very impressed with this squad. Again, defense could have been better. I think the biggest question for this side going into the game against Creighton, speaking of which, they're only having a 26.3% chance to win that, according to ESPN's analytics. So, that being said, they got to show up, and they got to show up big, especially on the defensive side. If there was one thing that UConn's Hawkins showed late in that game, it was that you can take away the paint area, where you can take away Sonogo and those options. As long as you got a marksman, it's a game. You think about it, Hawkins only had 2 points in the first, 26 in the second half, put the team on his back. And if Xavier were to play like that on Saturday against Creighton, once again, noisy environment in Omaha this weekend. That should be a good one. I think games will start at 12:15 Eastern, if I'm not mistaken. But nonetheless, it was a high-scoring game at Cintas Center earlier this year. Xavier won 90-87. I expect the same in Omaha, meaning there's going to be a lot of weapons, meaning you're going to have to be a little more selective on how you guard, especially guys from behind the arc, because you cannot allow that to happen again if you're Xavier. You want to have that command. More importantly, if you get out to a good start, which they did in the game in Stores, they got to show up. They got to show up throughout those 40 minutes if they're going to have a chance. Simply put, take care of your opportunities. All right, so we talked Xavier. Now let's talk Ohio State. And as I said last week, was not good. I kind of went into a little bit of a mega breakdown on how the Big Ten was working and how OSU, simply put, just had to get their stuff together. Otherwise, it was not going to work. Kind of showed. They were able to get a win and stop their losing streak. 93-77, they pulled a victory over Iowa. However, they did lose in Champaign on Tuesday to Illinois 69-60. Granted, they did go on an 8-0 run in the last 4 minutes to at least make it, and you've got a 36% chance this weekend to win against Indiana at Assembly Hall. Sure to be electric. I've seen I saw it actually on Wednesday when I was watching the Xavier game. This is going to be a hype game for Indiana. And believe it or not, this is kind of an OSU weekend for them. Props to the Hoosiers women's basketball team. You had a top 10 matchup between OSU women's basketball and then Indiana. The Lady Buckeyes, I should say, were number 2, and then the Lady Hoosiers were number 6. And then Indiana ended up winning that 78-65. More than 10,000 people in attendance at Assembly Hall. And once again, I think it's going to be a packed house there in Bloomington. And once again, I think the Ohio State Buckeyes, that is the men's basketball team, has to do something they haven't done since beating Northwestern, and that's to get a road win. That too, you have to make a statement. And I might have said this last week, but the out of conference pride, that performance earlier this year where people were like, you know what, OSU's maybe a 6 seed or so. It's diminishing by a lot, meaning they need those wins despite going 1-1 against teams that are arguably better than them in the Big Ten. It doesn't cut it. It doesn't cut it when it comes to Lunardi's bracketology system. And I bet it's the same with the NCAA. They're going to have to get this win against Indiana. Mind you, a 6 seed. So already, showing their power. Hell, Indiana could have been close to the top 10 earlier this year. Just get that culture back. It's simple as that. They need to get some culture back, almost to going back to the Tad Mata days. You can walk in to a big environment, but overall, show you're the boss. And I don't think I've seen that out of OSU in probably 5 to 10 years, honestly. So now let's take a look at your opponents. And again, I think Indiana might have one of the best players in the country in Trace Jackson Davis. Saw him when the Hoosiers played Xavier all over the court, and he's only gotten better. Despite IU only having 61 points as a team as they beat Minnesota by 4, Trace Jackson Davis put up 25 points, and I think this is the more surprising fact. He put up 21 rebounds. You heard me right. 21 rebounds in that game. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. 16 of them, too, on the defensive standpoint. So I don't know what Minnesota was doing, whether they were attacking the rim, how many of those rebounds were contested. But nonetheless, simple as that. Rebound the ball if you're on offense, and also rebound the ball if you're on defense. I think that's one thing we've seen out of Jackson Davis from when he played Xavier, where he was more of that kind of shifty guy underneath. He's going to be more of the guy that has the power in that paint to potentially get those points. That's a nice alliteration there. But nonetheless, back to work. You look at Trace Jackson Davis's stats, at least 25 points in the last 3 games. He's put up double-digit rebounds 5 of the last 6 games. And the all-around man, like I said, the rate he's going, he might win Player of the Year, at least for the Big Ten, knowing how he's playing. I mean, holy smokes. Simply put, if you can stop that guy a little bit, go ahead. And even if you can't, stop his teammates. That will help out a little bit as well. Simply put, I think Indiana is just a well-oiled machine. Without a doubt, Jackson Davis is spearheading that one and then some. That too, IU not only playing at home, not only playing against an OSU side that has struggled and have lost 5 of their last 6 games, they're on a 4-game win streak as well. Remember, they had a 5-game losing streak, now a 4-game win streak, looking for win number 5 against the Buckeyes to kind of cancel it out. And that too, for Indiana, after a pretty hot start to the season, they're trying to get back to potentially a good March Madness seeding, maybe to get a run in the Big Ten tournament. Like I said, if there's anything about the Big Ten we've seen this year, anything can go. OSU, despite, as I've said, not being that well in conference play this year, they were close to beating Purdue, the number 1 team in the country, at home. The same could go to OSU for when they play Wisconsin. Badgers are currently 4-5 in the Big Ten. That game, by the way, will be on Thursday, Groundhog Day, interestingly enough. playing the Badgers, but nonetheless, it's it's starting to show that as the weekends go on, Ohio State's repetition is getting a little more shady. They need two wins, and they need two wins quick, especially at Assembly Hall on Saturday night. I'll definitely be tuning in. That one will be taking place at 8 p.m. in what should be a great battle in Bloomington. Like I said, there's about 17,000 seats there. So if you can fill it up, go ahead. And it will be on, as Rob Stone says, Bart Simpson Fox at 8 p.m. Eastern. So sure to be some great action. Also sure to be some great action in Kansas City this weekend as the Bengals will face off against the Chiefs. And as I said at the top of the show, they got to play us. Again, they've been going back and forth on whether or not who's the favorite, who's the not the favorite in this AFC Championship game. The Bengals looking to head back to the Super Bowl after a great run last year. So I'll take a quick break, and then Wayne Box Miller will be joining me to talk about this great game on Sunday. Welcome back, everyone, to Buckeye Sports Breakdown. I'm Hirson Hassan, and the Bengals have a big game this weekend in the AFC Championship, heading back to Kansas City, where a lot of people are calling Burrowhead to face off against the Chiefs, hoping to get back to the Super Bowl. Joining me today is Wayne Box Miller, pregame, halftime, and postgame host for the Bengals Radio Network. Mr. Miller, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for joining me on this Friday morning.
Absolutely, man. Happy to be on with you.
Yeah, for sure. So just taking a look, we'll actually go back to last week's game. Great win against Buffalo, 27-10. And I want to focus on the defense, specifically the two rookies, Dax Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt, both of which were picked up in the draft. You had the privilege of seeing these guys in training camp and seeing how they've progressed throughout the season. And I'm just asking, how has their progression been from training camp to where they are now?
Well, I think both of those guys have really embraced the learning curve of the NFL. So many people don't transition successfully from college to NFL. It's a totally different game. But I think both of these guys in their own way. I mean, obviously, Cam Taylor-Britt was injured, had a little setback at the beginning of the season, and Dax was able to get out there and play more. However, I think Cam Taylor-Britt has come on strong. I mean, with the injury to Chidobe Awuzie, he was forced to step into that role and has played magnificently. I mean, for a rookie to get out there, he's a hard hitter, a sure tackler. Dax Hill is making a name for himself on special teams. So they're both playing extremely well. I think what they both have done well is I think that they both embrace learning from the veterans. And on this team, you have some veterans, man, that really want to teach the guys the game, what they need to do. And they both have absorbed that with a respect and admiration for those who have gone before them in terms of experience. And it's playing out on the field. And you see Cam Taylor-Britt get his first interception in the game against the Buffalo Bills, and Dax Hill playing a vital role on special teams. So these two guys, man, the number one and number two pick in the draft, are already proven that they were the right picks.
Mm-hmm. And they're showing it there. I mean, I watched the game on Sunday, and it seemed like CTB was lining up against Stephon Diggs throughout that game, and he played good coverage, got a well-deserved interception in the end. We're going to stick around with training camp because I saw on Twitter that a lot of special guests, I mean, I saw on your Twitter that Willie Anderson came and talked to the team during that time. What was some of the advice these guests and even some of the coaches, I mean, potentially even Zach Taylor, what did those guys give to the players in the training camp that's really helped them out this season?
Well, I think one of the things that they told them and preached was do what you did last year. You know, they got to the Super Bowl last year. They defied the odds last year. They ignored the naysayers last year. And ironically, and I can't understand it, why they're not getting the respect as reigning AFC champions. Maybe some people thought it was an aberration. And even if you thought that, the reality is they did it. And so you got to acknowledge that. But I think Willie Anderson or, the pivot crew of Ryan Clark and those guys coming through, Chad Ochocinco, everybody's telling them the same thing, man. Just keep doing what you've been doing and get better at the craft. And I think when you have a Hall of Famer or a Ring of Honor guy like Willie Anderson and Anthony Munoz talked to the offensive line at one point, that they have guys coming in that just really remind them the NFL is all about technique, preparation, film study. It's about executing, knowing your playbook, and just reminding the guys do what got you there, and then do a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. What are some interactions you've had with players? I would prefer current players, but just any players during your time with the Bengals radio network.
Well, I talk to a lot of players because obviously every week we try to secure interviews for, or in my case, the pregame show, which my interviews take a different path because Dan Horde does a great job of interviewing about football.
Mm-hmm.
What are they looking at? What are they trying to do? How do they feel? I try to look at the player off the field to give it a little insight as to their personality or their profile. For example, as intense as Trey Hendrickson is on the field, he's a devout Christian off the field, and he expresses his faith in a lot of different ways. I was able to capture that. Eli Apple is a guy that leans into his culture, his heritage. He's African by heritage, and so he's going over there to do his first ever football camp over in Africa. And so I try to find those stories, but I talk to everybody every day. I mean, I talk to Joe Burrow, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase. This locker room is so close, and they're so nice and such good people. It's not hard to have a conversation with these guys, man. Jesse Bates is a guy that since he got here has just been so consistent, and talk to him about things that players are doing now they didn't do 20 years ago in terms of working out, doing yoga, doing Pilates, doing all kinds of things that give you the opportunity to treat your body better than ever before.
Mm-hmm. Let's shift to the game on Sunday, and it's an interesting matchup with Burrow versus Mahomes, and Joe Burrow obviously getting 3 wins, not losing a game to Mahomes and the Chiefs. And it could symbol a little shift in who's the top dog in the AFC. Do you see that happening if the Bengals win this game?
You have to. I mean, they beat them 3 times. The Chiefs have been at the top for the last 5 years. This will be the second year in a row that the Bengals have gotten to the AFC Championship game. So you have to move them up now as one of the top 3 teams in the AFC, ahead of a lot of other teams that are the darling of the media. The results move them up, not your admiration. If they beat Pat Mahomes for the 4th time, you have to say they are the AFC team to beat, period. You didn't want to give it to them last year going into this year. But this year, going into next year, if they win the AFC Championship again, they're the best, period. There's no argument. There's no debate. I think one of the things that you see is that Joe Burrow seems to have success against the Chiefs in the 4th quarter, whether it's running the ball on a play that is covered well by the Chiefs defense, whether it's making a throw on 3rd and difficult or something of that nature, whether it's moving the chains. Joe Burrow has had success against the Chiefs defense. Conversely, Mahomes has struggled against the Bengals defense. Lou Anarumo and the packages and the schemes that he runs, and the player personnel makes all the difference in the world. When you're getting pressure from Hubbard and Hendrickson, and then DJ Reader is clogging up the middle, and you got 2 really outstanding linebackers in Logan Wilson and Jermaine Pratt, and the best secondary tandem in the NFL, in my opinion, with Bell and Bates, Von Bell and Jesse Bates. I just think this team defensively doesn't get the credit it deserves, but they don't care. Mike Hilton is just an excellent blitzer in those packages. He's going to get to the quarterback. So they've got all the elements, all the players, the schemes. And if they do it again 4 times, man, in less than 2 years, how can you not elevate them to the top of the AFC?
And I would agree with you there. I saw something this morning that they're relating to Joe Burrow's 3 road playoff wins. That's more than Peyton Manning and Joe Montana had in their career with both too. So already Joey B showing his cool in the moment and has a chance to do it again this Sunday. And with that, let's move now to the keys of the game. So if the Bengals are to repeat as AFC champs, what do they have to do this Sunday?
Number one, first and foremost, ball security. You got to protect the ball. And I don't mean just with interceptions or fumbles or losing fumbles, but even if you fumble and you recover it, you put yourself in 2nd and 20 instead of 2nd and 10, or you're 3rd and 3, you mishandle the ball, now it's 3rd and 13. So ball security, number one. Number two, put pressure on Pat Mahomes. The ankle I'm not worried about. The ankle is going to hurt, but he's going to move on it. He's a warrior. He's proven that. But do what you did last year. You confused him. You made it tough for him. I think they covered up Travis Kelce very well and made him a more difficult target. So I think that's number two. And then number three, win special teams. I think people forget in playoffs, field position is everything. It is every game actually, but in the playoffs, you really rather start on their 30, their 35 than their 10 or their 5. So field position is really key. And then I think the last thing is try because of Mahomes' ankle. I think they're going to try to run the ball. If they can run the ball and keep third down chain short, where they can dump off a pass or even potentially run for a third down. And that means Mahomes doesn't have to scramble as much and make a lot of those Mahomes type plays. I think that's going to be another key.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said about Kelce because in that game against Buffalo, it felt like whenever Josh Allen was in trouble and didn't get sacked, his first safety valve was Dawson Knox, who was wide open in the middle, did a pretty good job overall in that game. So did Allen. I mean, I'm not taking away. Allen's a pretty good
Sure.
quarterback as well. But I mean, I have to agree with you. I think without Tyreek Hill, who had a big game in that AFC Championship last year, it's going to be Kelce in the middle trying to get something forward. And I think one of those things is who gets to guard Kelce in the middle. Maybe it's a guy like Bates, maybe Von Bell. Logan Wilson, too, had a pretty big game against the Ravens. In my opinion, kind of taking a little bit of a backseat against the Bills. So he could end up maybe potentially doing well or potentially even playing a role as part of the defensive line. I think similar to the Buffalo Bills game, I think if the Bengals can get some pressure to Mahomes, ankle healthy or not, that's going to help kind of deter
Yeah.
in terms of the Chiefs' offense.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
we talked about the defense. Let's talk about the offense. So, give me one player other than Burrow who can make a difference.
T. Higgins. And I think a lot of people will be keying on Jamar Chase, obviously. The Bengals have a beautiful luxury nobody talks about a lot. Their three wide receivers are three distinctly different wide receivers. And so what I mean by that is Tyler Boyd is smaller, quicker slot receiver. T. Higgins is 6'5". He's very tall, rangy, can high point the ball above literally anybody in the secondary, played basketball, so he understands position, boxing out, so he can go up very vertical. Jamar Chase is a freak. Jamar Chase can beat anybody one-on-one. He's got the speed to outrun the coverage as he did with Kansas City the first time they came here last year. So I think one of the things that people don't really pay attention to is not the fact that they have three talented receivers. Dimensionally, they're three unique wide receivers and what they pose as a problem for the other team. So typically, if you play a team, both your wideouts are fast or both your wideouts are similar traits and characteristics. These guys have three different sets of characteristics, which means that they probably can exploit something on your end of the ball with one of those three players. And as those guys say, we're okay with that. They know that one day Tyler Boyd may get the most looks. Another week it might be T. Higgins, and then it could be Jamar Chase. But you also got to remember Hayden Hurst has become a very formidable target. And Joe Mixon has good hands as well. So when you look at Hayden Hurst and Joe Mixon as potential receivers, and they have lined up Joe Mixon wide, it's just trouble. But I think T. Higgins will be that one guy where they may throw that ball up and say, hey, you go high point it, go get it. Nobody can jump with him. That could be a problem.
And Higgins hasn't put up a big game in a while. I think the last time he had over 100 receiving yards was against the Patriots, if I'm not mistaken. He's kind of been on a rough spell since then. So, again, big moment. And hopefully, I mean, Higgins too had that big catch on the game against the Chiefs last year to kind of solidify the win. So, who knows? Maybe Higgins can show up. And also, don't forget about the offensive line as well. Did pretty solid against Buffalo, and I expect the
Yep.
same this Sunday.
They did, and I think the other thing is with respect to the misnomer is yardage. To me, when you're a wide receiver and you're playing games like this, the big statistic for me is third down catches. If you only have two third down catches and they're big and they move the chains in critical moments, that's the equivalent of having a big breakout game of 100 yards or something. Because if you're moving the chains on the big third down plays where T. Higgins is good for that, that matters. Oh, those are big plays. Those are clutch plays. And I think that keeps the drive alive and creates more opportunities for Joe Burrow. And Lord have mercy, when he has the ball, it's just the guy's a unicorn, man. I mean, he's a different dude, and I'm glad he's wearing Bengal stripes.
And I am too. So that will conclude this interview. Thanks for joining me, Mr. Miller. And you can always catch Wayne Box Miller and the crew on Bengals Radio Network this Sunday for what should be a good game in Kansas City. That game will be kicking off at 6:30. I believe your coverage will start at about 5 Eastern, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
we'll start at 5 Eastern, and I want to compliment you. I've been listening to you doing your broadcasts out there in Arizona. I'm super proud of you, man. I've just always been a fan of yours, and just keep up the great work.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And as always, Houday.
Houday.
Folks, before I sign off for today, I would like to do a chant that a lot of you guys know and love. So, say it with me. Houday, Houday, Houday think gonna beat them Bengals. Houday, Houday, Houday think gonna beat them Bengals. Nobody! I'm Mahirson Hassan. Thanks for tuning in to Buckeye Sports Breakdown. And have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next Friday.